Can I let you in to a little secret? One of my favourite places to visit on a holiday is the supermarket. Honestly, and it's not because I've forgotten to pack my toothpaste. It's because I have perhaps an unhealthy fascination with names of products that might be amusing. It's also because everything starts to become interesting. Fruit I've never seen before, biscuits I can't pronounce, different ways people shop, different sounds and smells. And then I'll often go and have a coffee, watch people going about their day, listen to conversations I only half understand. And for a while, I notice I've become curious again, until my brain remembers that email, or something I need to do when I get back to the office, or that conversation I forgot to have before I left. My body has arrived on holiday, but my mind is still at work. Hi there, and welcome to People Soup, real conversations about work, leadership, and being human, grounded in behavioural science with practical ideas you can actually use. I'm Ross McIntosh, and if you're listening to this before a holiday, or perhaps whilst you're on holiday, I hope this episode gives you something a little different. Not another list of things you should do on holiday, but perhaps a different way of thinking about what a holiday is actually for. Because I think we often think of a holiday as a reward. We work hard, we deserve a break. And that's true, but then we come back and start all over again, perhaps with the same habits that weren't working too well before we left. So I wonder if there's a better way of thinking about holidays. Here's a hypothesis I've been developing. When leaders spend long periods under pressure, or when they're simply exhausted, they often become less psychologically flexible too. And that impacts on their behaviour. Their attention might narrow. They become more reactive, more defensive, perhaps more controlling, more likely to avoid those difficult conversations, less curious, and perhaps less connected with what really matters to them. I don't think that's because they've become bad leaders. I think it's because their psychological resources have become depleted. And interestingly, this fits well with the job demands resources model. Every day our work places demands on us. Our attention, our emotional energy, our self-control, our capacity to make decisions. And those resources aren't infinite. They need replenishing, and that's where holidays become much more than time away from work. So let's have a quick look at the science. Researchers who study leisure and recovery have identified several ingredients that really help us genuinely recover. One is psychological detachment. That's not simply leaving work physically, but leaving it mentally too. It's like shifting a gear. Another is relaxation. That's giving our nervous system permission to settle. Then there's mastery, doing something enjoyable that stretches you, learning a few words of another language, trying paddleboarding, going to a yoga class in a new context, sketching, photography, gastronomy and wine, whatever it might be. And then finally, there's control, having genuine choice over how you spend your time. And I think all of those matter. But I'd like to add one more idea. Perhaps recovery is also about rebuilding or resetting our psychological flexibility. So, how might we recover on purpose? I'd like to share one simple reflection that I use before taking a break myself. And it's called the holiday matrix. If you've got a pen nearby, perhaps sketch it out with me. If not, there's a downloadable version in the show notes. So if you are sketching, take a piece of paper and draw one vertical line that crosses the centre of that piece of paper. And then draw one horizontal line that also crosses the centre of the piece of paper. So you've created 4 quadrants. Right in the middle, write these words. Me noticing. I love these 2 words because they remind me that whatever's happening around us, or inside of us, there's always part of us that's capable of noticing. Not judging, not fixing, just pure noticing. And before we start populating those 4 quadrants, maybe at the top of your piece of paper, we'll begin with the context. Ask yourself, where am I going? Who am I with? And what makes this situation unique? Because every holiday is different. A family holiday isn't the same as travelling alone. A staycation isn't the same as exploring another country. There might be caring responsibilities. There might be limited time or young children. Context matters. And this is also your invitation to create a macro pause. Perhaps before you leave work, write down what's unfinished. And leave a note for future you that you can read on your first day back at work. And then close the laptop, maybe put it in a drawer, take one breath, and let work have somewhere safe to stay while you're away. Now, let's go back to those 4 quadrants. I'm going to pose a question in each quadrant, and we'll start with the bottom right. So ask yourself, what matters about how I show up in this context? Bear in mind, this isn't what do I want to get done, but who do I want to be? Perhaps you want to be curious, present, generous, playful, patient. They are just some suggestions. See if you can choose maybe 3, 4 or 5 words that you'd put in there that represent the qualities you'd really like to bring to life in your behaviour. Then we'll move across to the bottom left. And my prompt for you here is, what unhelpful stuff might show up inside that might pull me away from what matters? And I'm thinking things like thoughts, emotions, urges. So for me, maybe there's guilt, a bit of restlessness. That thought, I should just check my emails. Maybe there's a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out. Maybe there's a bit of worry about what's waiting for me when I return to the office. Or simply finding it difficult to slow down. See if you can jot down a few things that are popping up for you. And notice, none of these experiences mean you're doing your holiday badly. They simply mean you're human. So we've completed the bottom 2 quadrants, and they represent our inner world. So maybe at the bottom of that vertical line, just write the word inner to remind us that that's our inner world. Because at the top of that vertical line, I'm going to invite you to write behaviour. Because those 2 quadrants above represent our observable behaviour. So let's go to the top left. And my question here is, what might I find myself doing if I was under the influence of that unhelpful stuff in the bottom left? So for me, perhaps you'd see me just slyly checking my emails, or logging onto Teams, scrolling LinkedIn for updates, thinking about my return to work and what might be waiting for me, reaching for my phone in every quiet moment. Being physically present, but mentally somewhere else. So see if you can jot down some things that you might do if you are under the influence of what you've written in the bottom left. Again, there's no judgment. What we're trying to do is notice patterns. And then finally, we have the final quadrant in the top right. And my prompt here is, what could I do to move towards what matters? And my top tip here is keep it small. Maybe something like leaving my phone behind when I have breakfast. Maybe sitting outside a cafe for 10 minutes with no agenda. Wandering around a local supermarket with curiosity. Learning some words in the local language. Reading fiction, going for a swim. Perhaps going for a walk or watching the sunset. Try something you've never done before. And here's one thing I'm going to try myself. Each day, I'm going to try and take one photograph, not of that famous landmark, but of something I only noticed because I slowed down. Maybe an interesting doorway, a shadow, some architecture, fresh bread, fruit in the market, the light on a wall. These photographs will then become evidence, not simply that I travelled, but that I was paying attention. Now we can bring it all together. And on the horizontal line, I invite you to write on the right-hand side towards, and on the left-hand side away, which represents the two main human motivations. We can move towards who and what matters to us, and we can tend to move away from discomfort inside of us. So take a step back and have a look at your holiday matrix. See if you can notice any patterns. And ask yourself this: which side of the matrix deserves more of my attention and energy on this holiday? The left or the right? We'll all spend time on the left. That's part of being a human being. But every time we notice, we create another opportunity to choose. Another opportunity to move towards what matters. That's why I love the words at the bottom of the page. Notice patterns, choose direction, and lead with purpose. I'd like to leave you with 3 small invitations. Number 1, create a simple ritual that marks the beginning of your break. Number 2, take 1 photograph each day of something you noticed because you slowed down. And number 3, choose a song that becomes the soundtrack for your holiday and play it each morning. Let it remind you of how you want to be in this precious time. Then months from now, when you hear that song again, perhaps it will remind you that those qualities weren't just for the holiday. You could bring them to any part of your leadership life. Because being on holiday isn't really about escaping work. Perhaps it's about returning with a little more curiosity and awareness, and rebuilding and resetting our psychological flexibility. So that's it. My thoughts on recovery with purpose in the bag. As ever, thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing People Soup with others. You're helping us bring evidence-based ideas to more people. Until next time, look after yourselves, Pea Soupers, and bye for now.